the SSRUS special board meeting on Monday, August 24th. We'll be utilizing communication and media technology and public participation via YouTube Live and call-in. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Robert Davies.
Here.
Tom Nell.
Here.
Terry Mills.
Here.
Mark Meister.
Here.
Bill Stanford. Steve Flynn.
Here. Here.
And Otto Prohaska.
Oh.
And Mr. Stanford is participating online tonight, so he is here.
100%. Great.
If you guys will stand for the invocation and pledge.
Got the sauce, Joe. Simmerdale, the high venture so Court Sauce Kentucky.
Sorry about that. Bless those present, O Lord, that the business conducted here this evening will be for the continued betterment of our city, and in keeping with thy commandments, we ask in God's name. Amen. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Pursuant to Executive Order Number 2069, issued by the Office of Governor Ron DeSantis on March 20, 2020, as extended by Executive Order 20-179, municipalities may conduct meetings of a governing board without having a quorum of its members present physically or at any specific location. Instead, municipalities may use communications and media technologies such as telephonic or video conferencing as provided by Florida statutes for members of the board appearing remotely and for public participation. While a quorum of board members is physically present for this meeting, along with a minimal number of key staff, we are following the governor's emergency orders and the city's emergency declarations regarding COVID-19. I'd now like to ask the city clerk to explain the procedures for the public comment and participation in this meeting.
Yes, sir. The following are the city's rules for utilizing communications media technology as provided by Section 120.545B2 Florida statutes as adopted by the City Council on April 6, 2020. As Chairman now stated, this remote meeting is being recorded, videoed, and streamed on YouTube Live, and the link will be posted on the city's Facebook page. The agenda and backup material posted on the city's website. Members of the public wanting to participate in the meeting are asked to, in the posted notice, to submit their questions or comments with their name and address and a reference to the agenda item on which they wish to comment by email to the city clerk at cityclerks@gulfbreezefl.gov or by regular mail to the city clerk's attention at the City of Gulf Breeze, 1070 Shoreline Drive, Gulf Breeze, Florida 32561. All written comments for this meeting had to be received by 3:00 p.m. today, Central Standard Time, August 24th. Anyone wanting to comment on agenda items during the meeting or anyone who would like to participate in the public forum at the end of the meeting can call into the following toll-free number, 1-888-585-9008. The call code is 186-319955. This number is also posted at the top of the agenda if you missed the writing down the number at this point. When your call is answered, hold and your call will be answered in turn. Comments on agenda items during the meeting and in the public forum may also be made via chat box on YouTube Live. The standard rule applies with comments being limited to 3 minutes and applicable to the agenda topic being considered. Does anyone have any questions? All right, good job.
Very well. Looks like we have about 3 sets of minutes we need to approve. I'll do those individually. Minutes for August 10th, 2020 special meeting minutes. Any comments and input, corrections? If not, do I hear a motion?
I make a motion to approve the minutes for August 10th, 2020.
Have a motion, second.
Yo.
Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries for approval. The second set would be for June 20th, 2020, SSRUS Utility Rate Workshop meeting minutes. Can I have a motion to approve?
I make a motion to accept the minutes for June 29th, 2020.
Motion made,
Second.
seconded. Any other comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries with those minutes. Minutes for February 10, 2020, SSRUS meeting minutes. This was on the SSRUS board 10 February 2020. Do I have that right?
Yes, sir.
You got it.
Any comments, input, motion?
I make a motion to approve February 10th, 2020 meeting minutes.
Motion made,
Second.
seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries, minutes are approved as read. We will turn now to the reports, and I will give my usual spiel on that. Assuming since we haven't met in some time, in order to refresh yourself, that you read everything in these contents cover to cover, thoroughly understand it, and except for outstanding questions that they beg for an answer, satisfied with them. So we will please present the reports, and anybody has anything to add to them or to question, now's the time. This would be for SSRUS development.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thomas Lambert is on the phone, so if there's any questions about any of the projects that I do not answer or cannot answer, he is here to answer on the phone. Just some items of note. The widening of 98 has started in the design phase. There's conflicts with our water and sewer lines, so we are involved with that project, and it'll be funded through a loan, zero interest loan with FDOT. That has started on the design work. The Gulf Isles lift station project is complete, and the Bengal Road lift station relocation and upgrade is completed. The Oak Drive force main project is completed. Other than that, we've been approved for a restore grant for the treatment plant expansion for $6 million, and we've been approved for a grant with the Northwest Florida Water Management District for a reclaim expansion project. Be down the road here, a year or two.
If I can, Board, today, myself and the city attorney reviewed the donation of 1.5 acres to the Midway Fire Department. If I could, I'd ask if Mary Jane could just update the board on where we are, because it's been a while.
Yes,
Yeah.
it has. So back in, actually, it first came to the council in February of last year. The Midway Fire District expressed interest in obtaining a portion of the ER2 property for future location for a new fire department. And the council at that time directed that SSRU, this board, consider it and get an appraisal, which you did, and then it came back to you and to the council in June of last year. The appraisal, which was attached to the agenda memo for the 1.5 acres, came back with a value of, for highest and best use, of $80,000. and I will just say, there was in the financial impact statement on the agenda memo, it was inadvertently, they used the dollar amount for that 1.5 acres based on the property appraiser's entire number for the entire ER2 property, which was only about $19,000. But again, you had in front of you the full value for highest best use of 1.5 acres at $80,000 would be the market value. And you did approve, and then it went on to council the following week, and the council approved going forward with that donation. As you know, I think you probably know, there is a lot of support from Midway for the city and vice versa. All of the fire departments in our area support each other, and therefore it's in the city's interest and SSRU's interest to assure that they have the resources and are able to maintain the levels of service that they need. And of course, they, like everyone at that end of the county, is anticipating greater needs in the years to come. We have now completed the drafting of the documents for that donation to go forward and the signing of the deed. And so we will be presenting those to the city council at, we think at the next meeting they'll be ready. And so it will go forward there for final approval.
Thank you.
I have a question, please. On the pipeline relocations for DOT, the pipe we're having to leave, is it primarily CA or PVC?
The pipe we're wetting?
The pipe that's being replaced. Is the pipe that's in the ground CA?
Is it CA or PVC?
I believe it's PVC.
Okay.
Thomas, do you know if you're on? I thought Thomas was on.
Thomas, are you on the line?
I am.
Did you hear Otto's question?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
I did, and it is PVC. No concrete.
That's good news. There's an issue with CA that I'll bring up later, and I thought I'd check down and see if we're running into anything down there, because it would be a bigger problem than it might be apparent. Thank you.
Okay.
That's all.
All right, and
Questions?
that's all that we have.
Top item there, the sale of the golf course acreage to, I see school board, I'm assured that that really is going to happen very shortly, within the next month or so.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, I can update you on that. The school board has completed its due diligence. The due diligence period ended on August 7th, and at that point, we heard nothing from them saying they were, had found something that would cause them to walk away from it. And we've been in touch with the school board attorney, and my partner, John Daniel, and I are working now with him to get all the final documents together, get the title commitment in place. And the contract calls for us to close within 30 days of the end of the due diligence period. That would put it on Labor Day, so it kind of cuts our time frame a little bit short, but the superintendent is willing to sign a short extension if we need it, and we would just have the mayor do the same if we need it. But we are working and hoping that we may get to closing by September 4th, I think would be our last working day to do it. So that is moving along.
Any other questions, comments on the report? I don't think we have to move for acceptance, just move on. Capital needs.
Financial, we have our financial report. Next, we're over 83% complete for the year for this budget cycle, and we're projecting a balanced budget of over $10 million for revenues and expenses. And our tap fees there's a lot of residential development, there's a lot of connections going on, so our tap fee reserve is growing. It's about 2.6 million projected by the end of the year. And we had a little bit offset in some of our expenses for COVID related to COVID special pay and for essential employees for a period of time. And I've outlined areas that are over on the budget, just with explanations listed there. If y'all have any questions on those, I'd be happy to address those.
Questions? Operations?
Operations. Overall, the operations, the reclaim system has been balanced. Staff are working hard on the water and sewer side, keeping things running. And the East Course irrigation project, since we last met, I think it's been completed and running very well. The water ground storage tank and the elevated tank were both inspected and cleaned. We had a challenge with the storage, the reclaimed storage pond at the treatment plant. We had an algae bloom that started in March. We've been addressing that with using lake doctors for chemical treatment, and then we installed some aerators to help oxidize the excess nutrients. We did have some challenges with algae clogging the reuse pump's intake screen, so we did have some interruptions in reclaim service. But we've seemed to be able to manage it, control it right now. But it has been something new that we haven't had to address before.
The problem with the reclaim, was it yesterday? Or was it-
Yes. Yeah, we had a main break up off of Nanahala Beach Road. And it was at the depth and location where we could not address it in-house. We tried to, but we've had to contract with utility service company. They have the expertise and the shoring and the trench boxes needed to address it, and they're still working on it right now. It'll either be up and running tonight or first thing in the morning.
Any questions on that report? We move into our regular agenda items. Council budget, I think that's kind of the main reason we're here.
Yep. Okay. Just to give you just some of the highlights, for fiscal year 20, we're projecting a balanced budget, as I mentioned before, a little over $10 million for the year for revenues and expenses. For fiscal year 21, we're projecting a balanced budget of $6,865,633. The budget for the capital items for next year are limited based on the operations surplus we're projecting. We're not budgeting all of the capital and all of repair items that we need to, because we're right now keeping the balanced budget without using any impact fees. And this is kind of a delay, as we had done a rate study with Raftellus, and that was an involved study that took a while, and the results for the study came a little too late in the budget process for us to implement it right at the beginning of the budget year. So there's going to be some changes we're going to be bringing to you after the first quarter, with some changes that we'll talk about here in a few minutes.
As we get to the end of the budget, we are going to ask that you provide some feedback of your general consensus, so that we don't have to repeat that and bring back to you the recommendations of the workshop, which were reflected in your June 29th minutes. But we just want to make sure that we're all moving forward kind of in general agreement as to how we're going to address the capital needs and build back up our reserve. So we want to make sure to get your feedback and general concurrence at the end of this workshop, so that we are moving forward with the city attorney, because there's some legal groundwork that has to be laid. There's policies and procedures for the city council, so that hopefully we can bring you back that new budget within the first quarter of next year.
So if I look at the PowerPoint, the second page there's the organizational chart. So the South Santa Rosa Utility Service falls under our water, sewer, and wastewater treatment facility operations division. Janae Roberge is our manager. And I cannot read that from here, but I kind of know it. But this shows our different subdivisions in our division. We've got within department water and sewer, that's the water plant and all the lift stations and the treatment plant, reclaim system. Next slide. Again, we talked about the Reftelis rate study. It involved both for inside the city and outside the city on the water and sewer and the wastewater funds. And again, the budget that we're bringing to you tonight, it basically includes a 3% rate increase and a balanced budget with limited capital items that are just a must-do list for now that we must do. And those items are related to the widening of 98. We have to do the design work and get ready for that. We don't have a choice in that. So that's the main items for capital right now. Let's see. Talked about the projections for this year, and we list capacity fee balance. That's kind of the new working title we want to work with when we used to talk about impact fees. And part of the rate study we found out is that the nomenclature we're using, we need to be careful moving forward what we call, there's connection fees, impact fees, and capacity fees. And we'll talk more about that later. It has to do with what you can use those fees for and what you can't, and how those fees are paid and why. For staffing, we've got a current full-time equivalent of 28.67. We're authorized for 30. We do need more, but we're not requesting it for this budget, but we may be asking you coming back later in the fiscal year, the new fiscal year, for a couple more service workers. So the description for our service areas for SSRUS, obviously it's customers outside the city limits. We list some items there, details about our water plant, our ground storage tank. We have 230 fire hydrants, 62 miles of water mains, 62 wastewater pump stations, 57 miles of gravity and sewer mains, and our treatment plant, 2.0 million gallon per day plant, soon to be expanded to 3.5.
Backing up just a second.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned the 3%. Is that the CPI that is automatically added in, not something anybody votes on?
That's based on the CPI. That was not necessarily from the rate study. We're raising all of our enterprise rates by that same amount across the board. So just a little highlights of the year, things we've done this year. Refurbished the centrifuge. It was due for a 20,000 hour service. Reject tank was washed out and inspected. The reuse elevated tank was inspected on the outside. We did a modeling study for expanding reuse to the west, to the end of the peninsula. Feasibility about doing that to expand our reclaim in the future. And again, we are approved for a grant for regional reclaim expansion through the Florida Water Management District. And we are approved for a restore grant for the treatment plant expansion. We completed a lift station condition survey, and again, the East Course irrigation project was completed and is running well. So for fiscal year 21, again, we're projecting a balanced budget, requesting a balanced budget of $6,865,633 with a 3% CPI rate increase. Also, we're asking for a change in our staffing plan for that, a shift for all non-exempt staff who cover on-call duties routinely. Every week we have at least 6 staff who are on call for emergency call-outs. And what we currently do is, if they get called out, it's time and a half. And that time and a half is also added into their 40 hours for anything over 40 time and a half overtime. And the cost is high, but the way that to calculate all that is very complicated for our billing system. And it's very complicated for staff to enter their time. So what we propose to do is to raise the pay for all of the service workers who cover on-call duty by $2 an hour, and the supervisors who cover on-call duty by $1. And then when they are on call and they have a call-out activity, it's just regular time. And the annual pay increase is factored into this as well, and our finance department folks looked at all the numbers, and it'll be a wash basically based on what we've done in the past with overtime. So we think this will be easier for us to manage. I think the staff will like this better. It'll be a morale booster for them, and it'll also be more attractive for our recruiting when we're trying to hire people, because the beginning pay rate will be higher. It'll be more in line with our competing utilities. And it'll financially, it should be a wash. It'll save man hours on calculating all the overtime, because right now the way we do it, it takes a lot of effort to calculate all the different forms of overtime. Any questions?
When does time start on the call out? When do they go on the clock?
As soon as they leave their house,
When do they go off the clock?
as soon as they return.
Thank you.
So, we talked a little bit about just wanting to make sure that staff are heading on the right track, and it's actually spelled out just step for step on your June 29th minutes on page 5. But at the end of the Raftellus workshop, we talked about next steps, and so I just want to, because it's been a while since we met, I just want to give a memory refresher as to where we are now, why this budget is so abbreviated. You know, last year, we didn't mince words when the SSRU board recommended a budget to the council. I mean, it was austere. It was not meant to be a 12-month budget. That is the budget that we have lived with now for going on 12 months. And we have really felt the, unfortunately, the negative side of that, because we have had not just deferred capital, but we've had emergency repairs this year that have definitely necessitated us dipping into reserves more than we had intended. And the reason for that is the operations audit. The city staff have been consumed with providing information to the state auditor's office, and we couldn't provide information to Raftellus for them in turn to do their analysis. And both were, I mean, just very, very time intensive. But in either case, it wasn't just a matter of handing them some paper. I mean, they were requiring our analysis and also just our knowledge on the history. And so we really had to stop one before we could turn our attention to the other. And that's, you know, where we are now. So now you have several years of deferred capital and even a more aggravated situation. And so at the end of June, as we held the workshop, I advised this board on next steps. And just to recap what Raftellus had proposed, in light of the future capital needs and also our capital maintenance, Raftellus proposed reducing the rate in the South Santa Rosa utility area to be the same as inside the city. And so right now, it's a differential of about $6 per 6,000 gallons of water. And Raftellus looked at why we have that differential and said, it's time to do another rate study. You're right, it's a good thing you called us, because that differential made sense, at the time, but now you're really sharing all your resources. It just, doesn't make functional sense to have that differential anymore when you're looking at the shared assets that you have. And then Raftellus proposed increasing the existing surcharge to what the city is statutorily entitled. We've talked before about not being able to find another service area that receives municipal service and isn't charged that 25% surcharge. But different than what we're doing now, the surcharge would stay inside the fund. And so it's really, and the ratepayers are making an investment back into the utility. And so we would educate customers that they're paying the regional average and why that is. Ways that we're talking about better educating customers is that we're working with a PR firm, and we've also reorganized within Jason's department. So the natural gas marketer is now the customer service marketer. We've taken customer service at the front here, utility billing, that has always fallen underneath the finance department organization, and we have moved utility billing and customer service underneath Jason's department so that it's working with that marketer, so that when we're getting calls and questions and concerns, we have a marketer who's able to push out newsletters, and we're able to do videos and better educate people about their water bill and reclaim the services that they're providing. And so right now we're at the point where we're talking about this temporary budget while we're adopting policies. And so one of the policies that Raftellus talked about was providing for a more transparent capacity fee, and taking the tap fee, separating that out as its own separate ordinance, which is more the standard. And lastly, Raftellus identified the $7 million worth of capital repairs and replacement items, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in the agenda item on capital needs, and how to hopefully drive down that $7 million loan so we're not having to finance as much in order to catch up. But again, I wanted to recap that and just kind of pause on that for a minute if there's any questions or comments. But it is going to require a lot of time and effort on staff and on Mary Jane. So we're going to be really turning our attention to this and keeping you informed of our progress and of drafts of those updated policies and ordinances. So just wanted to take a moment if anybody had any questions about that workshop or the direction that we're headed.
That's the best news I've heard in years.
I was hoping you'd say that, Otto.
Part of that, I think, when the public gets comfortable and aware that they're being treated equally, I think we will have better reception when we do have to raise rates and when we do have to raise capital. I think overall our public support will be tremendously improved with that. I really do. I'm so glad to see that.
Thank you. I'm very glad to hear that. That feedback is appreciated. Another thing we've been talking about is just as we consolidate and better communicate with our customers' operations, is it time to look at a kind of a rebrand? We're looking at improvements on our website and on our dashboard as it relates to our reclaimed customers, and also when you might have a precautionary boil water notice, so that as people go to our website they can instantly see that, and making sure that brand is really saying we're a regional utility and there isn't Gulf Breeze inside the city and South Santa Rosa utility outside the city. And so just be prepared for that conversation in the future. What does that look like? I mean, do we just call the entire utility South Santa Rosa utility, or is there kind of a new name that now it makes sense as we're continuing to grow as much as we are? So we'll be having that conversation with the board as well.
Good.
Yeah, thank you.
We would also be looking into a few months into the new budget year, maybe coming back to the table and in rewriting that.
Yes, and so we'll be sharing with you those, draft policies. We wouldn't need a recommendation on the ordinance. It would be for just informational purposes, but we will need a recommendation on that new budget that we'll then be taking to the council. By statute, you have 60 days after adoption of your budget to do an amending budget. And so we're basically recreating the whole enchilada all over again. So it's going to take a lot of effort, but we don't want to go another 12 months. Yeah.
And deferred maintenance is not a good term. Okay. Any other comments, questions on budget?
Also, Mr. Chairman, we have the 404 fund, Tiger Point. I don't need to go through this unless anyone has any questions. Our Tiger Point accountant, Kathy Getz, does I think a really good job of explaining this, but if anybody has questions on where we plan to end this year, the anticipated loss is a little over $300,000. Receiving an update just last week, it may be just slightly better than that. And then fiscal year 2021, the anticipated loss is about $260,000. We also have for history on page 61, see the total losses down at the bottom, and so you can see that's much improved from 2017, where the net loss was about $750,000. 735,000 and some change in 2018. 2019, of course, is when we had a management agreement with Integrity, and I'm sorry, that was 28. No, that was 2016, so that's not on here. I apologize. 2019, we're in the black because we sold land. 2020, you see where we project to in the year. So overall, the projections are much improved from where they were just a few years ago. And we also have Dee Dee Davis representing NAI Pensacola. She'll be talking with us a little bit later in our next agenda item, but she's here this evening because, of course, we listed the East Course property for sale, and so she'll have an update for you here soon.
Discussion on that?
Chairman, we did receive an email today, from Mr. John Brew, regarding agenda item 4A. And his question is, it's recommended that the city sell the south 17 acres of ERS1 from the total 80-acre parcel. Will deeded road access be provided from Highway 98 to the parcel is the question Mr. Brew would like answered.
So we are prepared to talk about that in just a moment, about the potential to sell that land, but it is not listed at this time, and so we don't know what the board or the city may or may not do in that regard, but we could talk about that in a little bit.
I'd comment on that, it's appropriate. With the economics as it is today, I think we would, that 51 acres, we ought to treat as a treasure. It's the last big piece that could be converted to prime residential. And I think we ought to look at carefully and nurse it along till the climate improves, where investments are going back and probably gain quite a bit more for it. It would have, of course, additional benefit going into residential and impact fee to us and so forth and so forth. But we only get one chance to do it, and I think we ought to slow down and do it right.
Okay. I want to just talk a little bit more about that and delve into it, but if we could just hold on for momentarily, because we'd like to talk about that parcel of land and two others. But before we do that, could we get a recommendation to the council just on the official minutes of the budget. I don't know why I'm having such a hard time talking tonight.
Yes, I'm so sorry.
Yes, sorry about that.
If there's no more discussion on the budget, do I hear a motion?
I move we take it.
Motion made,
Second.
seconded. Do you have any comments, from Leslie?
No, sir.
No comments from the public? Any other comments by the board? All in favor? Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Okay.
Next item, which I tried to jump into earlier and realized I'm on the wrong line, is capital needs, reclaim capacity and surplus property.
Yes. And so if you'll flip with me to page 63 on the back, you'll see the breakdown of ERS sites 1, 3, and the 51 acres. And then you also have in your packets, I printed out some more, but then I realized we've all have them. And I think Leslie has it on the computer too. But these are the 3 different parcels that we're talking about. The reason why we wanted to bring this to you this evening is twofold. Number one, we know that we have a $7 million catch-up loan. And number two, we have received interest in all 3 of these properties, but they aren't listed. And so, just because somebody kicks tires doesn't mean that they, want to buy it. But it did, warrant conversations with Dee Dee and her team, and then also with BDI. And so that's why Mr. Rick Delp has joined us this evening. And so the question posed to BDI is that this board has reviewed your effluent capacity report in times past to make sure that with the expansion of Tiger Point that you have the land that we're going to need for for effluent disposal. And we've talked about certainly making sure we're doing geotech, and we're looking at land that's most suitable for rapid infiltration basins. Well, a lot has happened over the last year. For years we have talked about expanding reclaim in South Santa Rosa Utility, and a game changer occurred because we now have a signed memorandum of agreement with Santa Rosa County and Holly Navarre Water Systems. And what that means is that the Northwest Florida Water Management District is supporting the expansion of reclaim to the tune of $10 million. And the city's portion of that is that $2.5 million that Jason told you about, which may actually be a total of $4 million by the time we're all said and done. We're hoping it's going to include a booster pump station. But we know for $2.5 million we've received that commitment. And so that's pivotal, for all of South Santa Rosa Utility, because the first phase is for Santa Rosa County to upgrade the wastewater treatment plant on Navarre Beach, and Holly Navarre is then going to be constructing the line to the Eglin Rapid Infiltration Basin. The second and third phase, which can happen simultaneously, is the connection between Santa Rosa County, Navarre Beach and Holly Navarre, and then the South Santa Rosa Tiger Point reclaim to Holly Navarre Water Systems. And so at this point, the arrangement is that we are receiving reclaim from Holly Navarre to provide that reclaim along with ours as a steady supply for our existing customers. So that's great, just to meet existing demand. But Santa Rosa County has expressed interest that, hey, we may end up just sending you reclaim as well. It doesn't make sense to really send it uphill. That can be during extreme wet weather events that we send reclaim up north, but otherwise, we're expanding reclaim on the peninsula. So that's wonderful. But it also opens the door that in the future, we also during wet weather, we could perchance send reclaim to Eglin, and they have opened that opportunity. So that agreement hasn't been executed, but we know that that opportunity is there. So what we asked Baskerville Donovan to do is just look at what is the most sure thing. Forget all those what ifs, which are exciting opportunities and horizons which weren't open before. But just given our service area with the expansion of the Reclaim Interconnect, what does that mean for those residential connections? Because does that translate into the city requiring less land? And so the letter that you have in your packet from Baskerville Donovan is, in fact, it does. And so that is very good for this board and for our city when we're looking at, $7 million worth of capital needs, that as it relates to our permitted effluent disposal capacity, because we are expanding our reclaim, the potential for this market then means that we can sell land and still have adequate capacity. Now, we made sure with the driving range and with the pending school sale, that land sale included terms where they would have to recapture any lost effluent. And that is what BDI proposes, of course, is that if we do have a land sale, do everything possible to negotiate so that they're having to recapture that effluent as much as possible, so, or at least to the maximum extent. So of course we would do that. But the three sites that are in front of you, and I'll ask Jason to jump in, but ERS Site 1 is 83 acres, 30 acres of that is wet. And we received an appraised value just a couple months ago, and the appraised value is a little over $3 million. And so then you have the ERS Site 3 to the north of that, and that's 17 acres, a little bit more than that. 15 of that is wetlands.
This is
What did I just say?
behind the zoo.
Yes.
And that area, that's where these tracks are.
Yes, you're right. I'm looking at the big picture, but I should be looking at the smaller picture. The ERS 3 is on the north side of the highway. Sorry, ERS Site 1 is on the south side. So 3 is over by the
Flea
like
market.
the flea market. Yes. And then ERS Site 1 is by the zoo. And so those two properties, alone, there's potential for, an appraised value of over $4 million. And then that brings us to the West Course. And what I shared with Dee Dee is that I really don't know how the council feels about the potential sale of the remaining acreage of the West Course. I don't know how this board feels, because we have, addressed the business enterprise primarily because it required so much capital repair and investment in order to revitalize the course to what it is now, and hopefully, return it to the free market. And so the West Course has not been as much of, it's just not been a problem. And so it wasn't an urgent need to address. Where we've had issue is in the sale of the East Course. Even though we've had a lot of interest, and I'll let Dee Dee speak to some of that, it just has been slow progress because without at least a portion of the West Course, maybe to build an amenity for the sale of the East, it's been very hard to get anyone to just buy a losing enterprise. And so I recently shared with the council that Dee Dee has gone back and talked to those potential buyers, and we're saying, show us plus or minus, 5 to 8 acres along the East Course that you might carve out, and what would you do with that? Would it be an amenity for golf? Would it be tennis pool, hotel, and come back and show the city what you would propose there. And so that is still going to leave, 45 to 50 acres of the west golf course. And most of those parties who are interested in the east course would like the west because they want to maximize their profit. They'd like to build something there that is, newer, larger homes. I want to open this up for discussion. I want Dee Dee to share with you some of her thoughts. But I'll just share with you a little bit of what she and I have talked about, is that if this board wants to start looking at the West Golf Course, because it isn't as urgent, what I would propose that you just consider is soliciting proposals to master plan this area and list out some of the amenities that you would like to see and really treat it like a master plan community. And I think if you did that on the front end and the residents saw that you're requiring, covenants and restrictions, and you're requiring a certain amount of amenities and, a minimum lot size, then it would lower some of the anxiety and give them assurance that it's going to be a nice added attraction if you wanted to do something at all on that property. The last thing I'll share is that the operations audit, which was requested by one of the 15 HOAs that border the golf course, during the exit interview that we had with myself, Mary Jane, and Mayor Fitch, the the conclusion that the auditors offered was that it is imperative that the city maximize profit on Tiger Point because of the costliness of golf. And our response was, well, you've looked at the appraisals. Maximizing profit would mean high density residential, and that is not in the best interest of the utility. If we sold property for high density residential, then we wouldn't be able to use it for spray fields. And that was the conversation we had back and forth. I don't feel confident that the auditors grasp that effluent disposal and our ability to expand our treatment plant has always been the primary driver of the decisions we make. It's in the best interest of the utility ratepayers. But I want to share with you that I do anticipate in the next couple months we're going to be receiving this operational report from the state auditor's office, and it's after about 2.5 years of being audited. And I do anticipate that it's going to say that it's incumbent on the city in the best interest of ratepayers to maximize the profit on this land. And so obviously our response is going to be what is in best interest of the city and its ratepayers is as it relates to the utility and effluent disposal. But I do want to share that with you, that we anticipate we're going to need to explain that and maybe have some answers that we'll have to explain. So any questions about any of that before I turn it over to Dee Dee to kind of share with you what she's hearing from maybe interested buyers on the east course and her thoughts for the west course? Okay, all right. So Dee Dee, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I know we're talking about a lot of stuff tonight.
You're talking about a lot of stuff tonight.
Yes.
I never knew that I would be this interested in affluent, to be perfectly honest. But real estate and affluent. Is it okay if I speak from here?
Yeah, we might need to get you up to the table by mic. We'll get you up there. There you go, there's one right in front.
Thank you, and for giving me a few minutes, Samantha, tonight. She asked me to give you basically a brief update on what interest we have seen in the East Course. And we've seen tremendous interest in the East Course from all over the country and even from some international investors. But once they dig deeper into this, most of them aren't willing to take the risk for a losing enterprise. And not only do they not want to take the risk, but you can't get financing. A bank won't loan on a losing enterprise, and so it's got to be a cash investment or a pool of investors that are going to take this on. And we've had some potential buyers that have really dug deep into this. They have analyzed the numbers, and everybody in this room has been so supportive and, in transparent and providing the numbers for them to look at. And so they back away. But one of the things that we kept hearing was, if there was something that was added to the East Course to make it more attractive, to give a prospective buyer the opportunity to probably enhance the amenities for the course, a place where they could see that they could actually do something to turn all of this around. So we looked at it, Samantha and I have talked about it, and we've had even a lot of the buyers just to get their feedback on what would it take. And I've worked with staff here at the city on this. And so basically what we have come up with to sweeten the pot on this, to provide for a buyer, is to take 5 to 8 acres that would be just south of the clubhouse. This wouldn't affect the value of the rest of the West Course that you see in the map up there in the green. But that 5 to 8 acres would be around a pond that is just south of the clubhouse, would be adjoining the East Course, and would give a buyer enough opportunity to do things that Samantha described earlier. They could either put some sort of small boutique hotel, or they could put cottages for players to rent out when they came here, put tennis courts, things that they could do to enhance the clubhouse to make that more attractive, and then consequently turn the red into black at the end of the year. So we have, I think on have they seen that map where it's designated on the listing? Is that coming out to them?
But,
okay.
Leslie has that.
So that you can see exactly where we're talking about. There's no other place really where you could carve any of the land out to do this, because it would negatively impact the value of the West Course, and that's the last thing you want to do, because it's a valuable piece of property. But this piece would come out of the West Course, and there it's marked in the white rectangle up there, so it wouldn't impact the rest of that horseshoe of the West Course, but could give a buyer an opportunity to do something different that would enhance the East Course and hopefully sell it quickly. And I'm open to feedback or questions.
Sounds good.
I like that. That's good feedback.
So talk with us a little bit about the West Course, and as we've been focused on the East, some of the questions and, what you're hearing on the West.
Well, of course, a lot of the people that have looked at the East Course and asked for a slice of the West Course, it's not really about, trying to enhance the golf course. This is about trying to develop that land, and it really needs to go all together. There has been a lot of interest in that land, and up to this point, we've just said it's just not on the market. It's not available at this time. So I know a lot of people are watching it to see what you decide to do about it. There's continued interest in it and in all of these parcels. This one, I think if I were sitting in your shoes and had to make a decision about recommending some of these parcels being put on the market, I would make it a fluid process, and that is that if all 3 of them went on the market and one of them were to sell, I'd regroup and discuss where you were and have your expert from Baskerville Donovan come in and talk about where you are with that affluent and absorption there. Because if all 3 of those sold at the same time, and I don't think that would happen, but if they all sold at the same time, I think you're going to have a lot of questions that you're going to have to answer, and a lot of issues to face. They're all valuable parcels. I think the most difficult is actually going to be number 1, because I noticed in the Baskerville Donovan report that he is also recommending that the northern portion of that parcel be carved out where the elevated tank is located. So you're gonna have some access issues. I know you had a question that had come in on that. You're gonna have some access issues. It's all doable, but there's a lot of wetland there, and you're gonna have to cross a big stretch of that wetland to be able to access the southern part, which is the most valuable piece of that. So that appraised value that's on that, I would say, don't get too swept up in that number at this point until you decide what is going to do about carving out the necessary piece for the tank at the northern end, dealing with the wetlands there, and then taking a look at what kind of acreage you've got left. So that the number, an appraisal, as always, is a good start. It's a good snapshot of the moment, but it was appraised at highest and best without taking those kinds of things into consideration. It's the only thing I would have to say about that.
Okay.
How about, how does the clubhouse factor in any of this? Is it considered an asset, is it
A diamond in the rough.
Is it a loser, or just, how could the clubhouse itself be factored in and make it part of it?
It's, of course, it's a big part of it. It's critical. That golf course will never go without a clubhouse. It needs a lot of TLC, and that's another thing that has scared off some of the prospects. They see the kinds of upgrades that are needed on that clubhouse. It truly does, but I'm one of those that goes out there and sees it, and you think, once this is restored to glory days, what you could do with special events out there and in building up that as a destination. And that's why we're really hopeful that, with your blessings on this, that additional land that can create more amenities for the clubhouse is just a win-win. That's a landlocked piece, so the only way it can be accessed, and that's why it can't deter from the value of the rest of the West Course, is because the only way you're going to be able to access that will be to park at the clubhouse and then take golf carts out there to utilize whatever amenities they move forward with. So it's perfect for that. It all ties in together. The clubhouse is a critical piece of it, and is also, a piece that can be a game changer for the right group of investors. But again, you're talking cash investment here. You're not talking any kind of loan that's out there for something like this. And with overall nationally the trend for playing golf down, and that's everywhere, the clubhouse becomes even more important for destination events and restaurants. Does that answer it?
So what are the thoughts for, basically what we're sharing with you is Samantha's sitting at her desk trying to figure out how we can not borrow $7 million. And there's not when you're looking at deferred capital and needs that we've had, for a number of years, that means that we're going to need more cash so that we don't have to borrow as much. And so the timing is on our side because of the memorandum of agreement that allows us to expand reclaim and further, refine these numbers so that we can find, that we have surplus property. Again, the goal would be to recapture effluent on property during any, negotiations, maybe convert to subsurface or rapid infiltration basin. But what are your responses? Are you liking the idea of selling land? What about Dee Dee's proposal that maybe we list all three, and the first one we start negotiating with that, and if that moves forward, then we take the other ones off the market? What are your thoughts with this idea?
Sell the land.
And just list all three and see what we get, or okay, that would be your
When you
preference.
borrow money, it just costs the utilities more money in the long run. And these are assets that are sitting there, and You may or may not increase in value significantly over a period of time. And if you look at it, if somebody does take that property, the bigger one, and develops homes, that's gonna be more utility service for us. So that's a kind of a win-win in the long haul.
What do you think about soliciting for proposals where we, I'd like to, work with you, Terry, and the members of this board to kind of come up with amenities that would be more palatable for the neighborhoods in Tiger Point. I think if we just listed it without, stating that there needs to be covenants and restrictions and that we're expecting an HOA with minimum lot sizes.
You think that land's gonna be on the west course of primary for homes, is what you're thinking, or high density construction? Nobody would want high density in there. people.
No, they would
Homes
not.
would be the, use for homes would be the highest value to us in the sale. I don't know, I've not looked at it to see how it would work out for high value homes. Parts of it may, I'm sure is all right, other parts it's kind of questionable.
Yeah.
But high value homes would give us the highest price for the land.
I mean, you could carve out an HOA with larger lots, and that covenant would satisfy all those HOAs surrounding it, and there'd be less opposition.
Yeah.
And then it becomes a sought after place, because bigger lots, and it is pretty out there. I mean, the landscaping is nice.
It is gorgeous. What would you think
Kinda
about?
What we tried to do, what was that golf course that finally went under the moors or whatever it was?
Yes.
Across the way, they tried to take advantage of the golf course there and build,
Yeah.
I don't know why moors went under, but,
Yes. What would you think about if we were to, bring you maybe some proposals for making the waterfront property maybe a higher density, but then more inland, leaving that as green space?
I would, if I could inject here, I think rather than you laying that out for someone, you let the buyer bring that to you.
So, Dee Dee, have you done something like this where, you have 45 to 50 acres and you specify, what you would like to see in a master plan scenario, a minimum amount of green space, lot
Sort of
size?
RFP project.
It is, yeah.
Absolutely, all the time.
Okay. So that if we bring in the board doesn't like it, they don't move forward with it.
We can do that.
Okay.
and I think the bigger lots would normally build bigger homes of higher value, and makes the land more desirable. And you don't want little tiny cooker cutter lots. That's what I noticed from here. When I moved from Georgia, everybody had at least a half acre to an acre, 2 acres lots for their houses. Down here, we're not quite as bad as out west or down in South Florida where you get a quarter of an acre. But I think people like a little bit of land even if they don't do a lot of it. Build bigger homes without having to go up.
Okay.
I mean, that's just a proposal. You gotta make it attractive, but you gotta have some restrictions so that the homeowners around there won't feel that their property values have decreased. But it's gotta be, it can't be real expensive homes, because nobody will buy the homes next to homes that are, medium level homes if you wanna go out. They have nice homes in that area, but I don't know comparable property values. The homes are getting more and more expensive. In my subdivision, they're building $500,000 homes now. Or at least they're trying to sell them at $500,000, we'll put it that way.
I would say,
Why don't you let me put some language together to bring back to this board to consider as how to best approach it without developing it for someone, but put criteria together.
Has anybody polled the HOAs around there? See what they would be willing to accept? Just out of curiosity, because you hear them always flare up when, the golf course was going to be purchased, and then we made improvements, and coming up with selling it, they all get really nervous.
Correct. And no, to answer your question, we have not polled them with the school land for sale. You know, obviously that property, that plus or minus 45 acres, appraised highest and best use for 3.9. And when we looked at recapturing the effluent, then that total value, you know, we calculated was about 2.9. Of that, the cash was actually 1.9. The other million is what it, you know, would cost us if we had to go purchase, permit, and construct that effluent somewhere else, or the effluent disposal. And so we have tried through, you know, emails and newsletters to explain that, you know, thinking that it's for the good of the utility. I'll say when we went to the county, I attended, and it was the school board asking for the conditional use permit to build. And we did have, you know, a president of the Santa Rosa Shores HOA, Mr. Rod Miller, who comes here quite a bit. And then we had a resident of a different HOA, and they just stated they would not accept anything other than the city restoring the West Course for golf play. And when we look at the projection of what we have invested, which, you know, recap, including the purchase, we're at $11 million, you know, now. So they just would not accept, you know, anything other than that. I think it's going to come down to education, and then also making sure we're doing something that this board and the city can be proud of. That when we look back and, you know, there is green space and there's a school and there's a revitalized golf course, we're going to need to tell the story then.
Is there any legal restrictions about how we use that land with these homeowners associations? I know there's been some agreements from years and years ago, and are they still valid now?
That was one issue brought up with the county, is that we are a government and we're selling the 45 acres to another governmental entity. And so for that reason, if there's any issues, clarity of title, our attorneys, you know, provided a court's opinion that we would be exempt from that. If we were to sell, you know, land on the West Course, which has not been a, you know, a functional golf course now for a number of years, that would be an issue that I would think a potential buyer would need to, you know, review with the title company. And there's restrictions on some portions of the land and not others. So
Okay.
maybe look at that.
If I can make a comment on that, the appraisal that was done on it that just came back in May does clearly state that they are not aware of any encumbrances,
Okay.
any deed restrictions, any HOA, any kinds of covenants at all. So it's appraised based on no commitments to anyone.
Okay, good.
But I would
Seems like
still
it-
want a legal opinion on that.
Seems like if we're gonna list, we should list all three, that if at some point we have to pull one back in order to make the other one work, then
We
go
could do that.
direction. And just tell somebody, put on your visionary cap and figure out what you wanna do.
Well, that's why I said, I think that list, however you want to proceed, it really should be a very fluid listing depending on what's going on with each parcel.
And the idea of carving out the 5, 6, 7 acres, I see your point. It would make the expansion of the clubhouse more useful to whoever would buy the golf course. You're right, nobody's gonna buy something that loses money, and unless they're trying to get it as a tax write-off, but it's not. And you're right, that doesn't really affect the rest of the West Coast.
Could we get a motion on that so that we can carry it forward to the city council and they can, we would need their authorization for staff to start working on this and work with DD. So that doesn't mean that we're gonna be bringing back an offer or anything, but this does require new time and resources from what we have been doing. So I would like action from this board as a body, and then also from the council.
You mean to?
You state the motion and then we'll.
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
The piece that you want to carve out, all you're proposing is that we offer that as part of
the east course, you're not proposing that we build anything out there or
No.
plan anything or anything else, okay. That was I just wanted to
Right.
clarify that.
Right.
Just try to
We're not-
sweeten the pot.
You know, we're just gonna throw in some extra land that we
Right.
don't really have any use for anyway.
So they can see some way that they can
Okay.
turn this around, something to do to
Right,
improve.
I understand the
it, right?
purpose.
A little
I just
bit
wanna
of
make
land,
sure-
yeah.
Just wanna make sure we
Exactly.
weren't gonna build them another clubhouse or a
No.
tennis court or whatever. So, okay.
So I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but just to make it short, perhaps it could be, I'm gonna take a stab at this. But that the board recommends, the city's broker of record proceed with listing the 3, ERS sites as presented and bringing back, to the board a recommendation,
Regarding the.
For future
regarding
action.
the West Forest. Do we need to be more specific
No.
than that, the master, okay?
We gotta
A
get a,
recommendation regarding the West
There
Forest.
is a,
should we not address this little triangle thing first, so that's not involved in the West Course sale? Or do you think that'd make a difference? Seemed like you would have two motions, one motion to consider, adding the 7-8 acres to the east
You wanna do,
course.
okay.
And
It
then the
doesn't hurt.
second motion would
Okay.
be put all three of them up for potential sale.
We like it. Let's do that, if you would, please.
this right,
So you didn't record that?
No.
I'm not sure I could say that. Okay, the first motion would be, consider moving, whatever that property's called, to the east course to enhance the value of the east course for potential sale. That'd be the first motion.
That's gonna be, if I may, 10 fairway and hole 18 fairway and tee, if you wanna be specific. We need to be.
Okay,
10 fairway and 18 fairway.
whatever that is. Okay.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any input, Leslie, from the public?
All right, I do. We have Jennifer Waters, 3911 West Madura Road. The underlying zoning is PUD, which is regulated by the county. The property owner will have the density rights available under the plan unit development regulation. Has the SSRUS board evaluated other future uses for the West Course?
I think we're doing that right now.
I don't think we've made any formal evaluations at all. We've discussed potential utilization, potential, but we've made no ruling.
That's right. 10 fairway, and that's also-
10 fairway, 18 fairway,
I don't know if we can answer that.
and 18 tee.
Just vote on
We
the
will.
additional. land.
Yes, I think we could just vote on the initial, but, to Otto's point, I guess the answer would be no.
That's clear enough.
Yeah.
We still have a motion. Any more comment or input from the board? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carried.
All right, the second motion is to place the West Course back 9 after hopefully the approval of motion 1. ERS 3 and ERS 1 up for sale. And the board will review all proposals prior to any commitment. Need to be worded differently.
Should we specify the 51 acres?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
It says back 9 here, so that's the 51.
And subject to survey, since we just carved
Yeah.
out
Okay,
a little
subject
bit.
to survey.
We have a motion that everybody understands?
Okay, we make a motion for the West Course back 9 to 51 acres,
Yeah.
subject to surveying. and ERS 1 and ERS 3 parcels of land to be placed, evaluated and placed on the market for potential sale of the property, subject to the approval of the board and the city council. Is that clear?
Yes. Do we have a second?
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We do have, Ms. Waters again. The Emerald Coast Council, our area TPO, has 2 alternative transportation routes that pass close to this area. Has the board or city looked at partnering with FDOT to development beside as part of the Greenway or Waterway Trail development?
Again, Mrs. Waters was the attendee to the county who spoke in opposition for anything aside from redeveloping the west course for golf play. And so what you're hearing, I think, from Ms. Waters, she's asking, she also spoke to the benefits of bird watching, but she is asking both in her first question and in this one, have we looked at potential uses related to trails with the TPO and passive recreation play? And so
Officially, I would say no.
okay.
Could I ask a question about that motion? If that motion passes, does that mean that you want another proposal on ERS 1 and 3 as well as the West Course?
All right. And also, I make a comment, they are widening Highway 98, and I don't remember if they go to the north or the south of those existing highways, so some of the land there, 50 feet or 100 feet, may disappear to either side.
We have a motion, does everybody remember it?
Yeah. Then second, right?
Yes. Second.
That's Steve.
Any other comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Good. Thank you all.
Anything else on that subject? Item C, transfer of impact fees from residential property to commercial property.
Yeah.
Okay.
Merrill Land Company would like to transfer 6 of their water and sewer impact fees from residential lots on Clear Lake Place to a commercial piece of property on US 98. And we have done this in the past. Our recommendation is that you recommend this to the city council, but that with the stipulations that the persons who purchase the lots provide notarized letters indicating acceptance of the transfer.
This is, staff recommends this to be acceptable. Any other discussion? Your motion?
I move we accept staff's recommendation.
Motion made. Second. Seconded. Any input, Leslie?
Yes, sir.
Any other comments about it? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Any more new business?
It's been a nice party, and I hate to end up on a bad note, but there's a potential capital requirement. The city is supplied by that 10-inch CA line that's 65 years old, buried in acid soil. It's undersized for today's needs. We don't know, or I don't know, how far that CA pipe extends to the east. To replace it through the seashore is probably $600,000 to $700,000 with a 12-inch line. And how far it goes into SSRU, I don't know.
We're
But
gonna,
that's something that we ought to look at.
come on, I heard you
In
talk,
our
that's
big
what you get.
capital investments, they crank it into any borrowing, anything we need to do into the 2022 budget maybe. As a result of some work, when I was working with ECUA in '93, that pipeline, as part of a discussion, was offered for the ownership of ECUA. I was tasked with investigating that line. I did an engineering investigation, dug up a lot of stuff, and I recommended to ECUA that they not accept the ownership of that line. It's in a condition that's indeterminate. Further concerns, about a year, maybe 2 years ago, Utility Service was renewing the park connection to their north picnic grounds. And they're trying to make some taps into there. They had acute problems with that pipe fracturing before they could get their connections in there. I'm bringing this up at this time. It's something that ought to be looked at the capital plan. And further, we ought to look further on down the highway and just see how much CA is in that line. I have reservations since it was put in '55, and who owned it then, I don't know, how far that CA line went down, but I'm afraid it probably went down to Santa Rosa Shores at that time. So we may have a big hunk of it out there that's in the ground. And that's all my comments on it. That we start looking at that thing
Okay.
and start considering in the future, because it's going to be mega bucks to do something with it.
What portion of it was ECUA? What portion of it was that, you shared that you had recommended to ECUA before that they not accept the line?
Part of the negotiation, I was a worker bee. I was not on the management table. And ECUA was discussing with the city water supplies and contracts. As a sweetener in that contract, the city offered that pipeline to ECUA as a method of exporting water to the east. Whether that was accepted, what happened with it, I have no idea. But before ECUA wanted to assume that line, they wanted to know what they were getting. And that's why I was assigned the inspection of that pipeline and to make a recommendation.
I see.
Well, I can provide some insight on where the cement asbestos pipeline is located. It starts all the way down in Navarre. It's a 12-inch line that comes all the way from the intersection of Highway 87 down 98 to just west of the overpass where the original meter for between Midway Water System and the city of Gulf Breeze was located. If you drive by there now, you still see the concrete foundation where that meter was above ground, and it's still sitting there. I know that CA pipe goes to that location right there. If it goes on into the city, I don't know.
It's tied into the city at 98, right at that utility alleyway in there. When ECUA made the changes, ECUA took a line
That's
over
correct.
to the west to the beach.
That's correct.
And they came on around and tied back into the Gulf Breeze water supply.
Yep.
There's a valve there now, you open it, you got ECUA water to Gulf Breeze.
Right.
You open the other valve, and it's the valve we're getting water through now.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's all, that's AC pipe that comes in, goes up to the tank, and goes to
Right.
that point at the overpass. Your connection to that is at the, your facility where the ground storage tank is, fill ups.
Right.
That's where your connection to that
Right.
pipeline is, right there on the.
Today. Yeah.
Today. Anything east of that, you're not even connected to. You get your water through Fairpoint Water utility system, and it's a ductile iron pipe that comes through the power line easement down that parallels Highway 98 and comes across just east of mariachis and goes down a little DOT drainage ditch and gets around to your tank.
Whose water is in the 10-inch line?
It's a 12-inch and it's Midway water system up until that point. Beyond
No.
that,
The pipeline through the reservation, is that CA line supplying water to the city now?
it does, yes.
Okay, that's the line I'm concerned about.
Right.
Oh, further down in that CA system, are you aware of any problem with failures or problems in connections or anything with CA pipe?
No, I managed Midway water system for 22 years. That pipe was installed placed in service in 1974.
Okay, that's later then.
Yeah, and I managed from 1985 to 2000, and I can only think of one or two major breaks we had on that line. Now, since Fairpoint put the higher pressure on the line coming through the National Seashore, I don't know why there were a number of T's that were installed along there. I don't know if somebody wanted to put some fire hydrants in and funding didn't allow it, but they went ahead and stubbed out for them. I think almost every one of those T's have blown out now.
That's what I've heard.
But
Yeah.
I don't know of any other issue
Yeah.
at this point that you've had with it. Cracking while trying to make a tap is
A problem.
a problem that can happen. But other than that, I don't know of any major issues that they've had with it,
Okay.
other than you don't want a lot of construction traffic going over top of it.
But either way, your point is heard that it is at its useful life, and so
It
it's time
is
to put it in the CIP.
The honest
And I
expected
appreciate
useful
that,
life.
yes.
And what I think, since we've not had a lot of problems with it, we're sensitive to the point, if they start popping up, it says we gotta move faster. That's
Yeah.
what I'm trying to get into that.
Okay,
You're coming up on
I
a
appreciate-
50-year life of that
Right.
Right.
CA
Time
pipe.
period. Yeah, okay. I appreciate that.
Okay,
We'll make
that's it, that's enough bad time.
Public forum, don't see anybody on the line, that's it.